On this episode of RC Kicks, we'll be diving into the vintage RC market, seeing what's super hot, what's gone up in price, what's gone down, what's desirable and what's not. So stay tuned, it's going to be controversial. Hi and welcome to RC Kicks. On today's show, well, we're going to look at the whole vintage market, what's currently going on. So I've got my notes and hopefully this won't be too long. I'll try and bang through it as fast as possible. Now, I did do another video like this 7 months ago. I'll put a link up here, go check that out. Obviously that was in February, it came out February the 7th, so that was before the whole COVID thing changed everything. But it's still quite interesting, I just watched it not that long ago, and a lot of my predictions were basically true, but not on why. Obviously things have changed because of the COVID, whereas I was looking more of a natural sort of trend. So I thought now would be a good time to review and do some more predictions of what's going to be hot, what's not, what's going to change and things like that. Now that's very hard because we're not quite sure what's going to happen with COVID as it moves forward. So let's dive into the vintage market. Well, over the last 7 months, everything has changed. Now my video that I put out before was in February the 7th, so obviously that was just before COVID came in and changed everything. So why did COVID change everything in the RC world? Well, a lot of people suddenly found themselves at home, not able to go into the office, with lots of free time, with their holidays cancelled and their outside activities stopped. This allowed them to have a bit more money available and a lot more time, and it's the time I think was the key. So a lot of people went online because you could purchase online where you couldn't go to shops, and bought new kits, bought up ReRelease, bought up vintage cars as projects. New people came into the RC market that used to be in it long ago, that thought I need to get some kind of hobby because I'm stuck at home. A lot of people with children, that kind of thing. So we had a bit of a perfect storm really, where we had people with time looking to find something to do, couldn't go out, and they went online and bought lots and lots of kits, which made up a massive demand that the suppliers hadn't predicted before it kicked off. So there was a huge shortage of kits and parts, so people then went into ReRelease and bought up some of the ReRelease, and as you can see, all this demand drove up prices. Now, so I've gone through and I've looked at some of the kits that have sold. Now, every time I give you a price on what's sold, assume it's a good quality car. Like the cars I have behind you, they're not doer-uppers. Well, some of mine are doer-uppers, but they are pretty much very good to pristine cars, not brand new necessarily. If they're brand new, I would class them as new in box kits. So when I give you a price, assume it's a very, very good one. So first I looked at Tamiya. Tamiya cars have all gone up in price. Now the first one I looked at was the Blazing Blazer, because that's commonly known as one of the most expensive Tamiya cars around, and it is rocketed. It went from £1,000. They now sell for over 1,500. I shoot myself, I should have bought one a year or so ago when I was thinking about getting one, and I thought they were expensive then. So that shows you that they have taken a massive push forward. Things like the Falcon, new in box, sold for £702 on eBay not that long ago. The Porsche 959 new in boxes are now selling for £720. Good examples are 450 to 500. This is a big increase. One thing I have noticed is that Tamiya decals, vintage decals, they used to kind of sell for like 35 to 40 pound. These are now pushing up 70 and 80 pound, which is insane. It just makes no sense to me, because 70 to 80 pound for a set of decals, I thought of 45. Now some of them actually are selling in between those prices, but really we should see them around the 35 pound, 70 pound. As soon as you fit them to a car, you pretty much lose half of that value. So yeah, prices have gone bonkers with Tamiya, and out of all the manufacturers that I'm covering today, Tamiya has taken the biggest push. Then we've got Kyosho. Now Kyosho, Mid prices, they were expensive anyway before this all kicked off, and they've held kind of steady. They are expensive anyway, so Tamiya has come up to that. The mid prices, the Optimum Mid Custom sold for £520. Optimum Mid Turbos go for 300 to 500 for good examples. But parts are expensive and in very short supply, and they seem to be in more and more short supply all the time. There's dribs and drabs, but the parts bin is very, very empty. Now, hopefully we'll see a Kyosho Mid RERE, but I'll come on to that later on. Schumacher, not many vintage cars around at all, really. They pop up now and again. They're quite strong in price. The Bosscat sold for £299.99, and a Cat 2000 sold for £281. So these are good prices for Schumachers. They've been pulled up. So the whole market has been pulled up. But what I've seen is Tamiya has been the highest growth. Even though Kyosho cars tend to be more expensive, there's definitely been a bigger demand for the Tamiya vintage stuff. Team Associated, the RC10s, European prices have increased even more so. The big ticket ones are the A-stamp gold pans. That obviously depends on quality. If it's a very clean gold pan, they demand big money. Then an RC10 graphite new in box sold for £594. An RC10 world car, not quite as desirable, is selling for £400 to £500. And the RERE new in box RC10 gold pan, they sold for £354. So that's one of these. This is my vintage one, and this is my RERE one. So that's what they sell for. Obviously these haven't been painted up yet. They're coming, I promise. So that's the vintage market overview. So now let's dive into the RERE market, and we'll start with Tamiya. Now Tamiya have just brought out the TC01, which I've got one here. If you haven't seen the build videos of that, I'll put a link up here. Now when this first came out, supply and demand were not matched. There was a big offset, and a lot of suppliers were trying to get some, but they couldn't get hold of them. So for a while there was a massive demand for them. Now we've just seen the second wave of kits coming into the UK, so now you can pick them up again. But one massive problem we've got is upgrade parts for the TC01, almost non-existent. They've all been bought up and you can't get anything. The only thing I found as an upgrade for this at the moment on eBay was one set of anti-roll bars, and it was like £28–29. Tamiya have also announced the Vanquish VQS. VQS, that's right. Now in my previous video I actually said that one thing that was going to go up in value was going to be the Vanquish, and I said that Tamiya would never release it, so I completely got that wrong, and that was a bit of a left field one by Tamiya, and it's fantastic to see it. I'm really chuffed. I will be getting one on the show, but there is a problem. Prices of this are coming out at £329 pre-orders. Now that's so expensive. And it's put a lot of people off because it's supposed to be the low-cost Avante chassis, being that it's all plastic. So why is it so expensive? Now, we know that it's going to come with a black pre-cut out body, but still, it doesn't make sense why it's so expensive. But we don't know things like what motor it's coming with, what bearings. That would justify the price a bit more. So I think it's scared a lot of people off placing pre-orders. Now, I have seen it as low as £300. Me personally, I will be getting one on the show to show you and build on the show, but I am holding off purely because I don't want to pay a higher premium and then when they arrive they drop down in price. Now there's always a gamble that I won't get one on the show, but being that the only difference that we can really see so far is some of the decals are different and the front uprights are more of the modern 2011 Avante versus the original more thin gunmetal kind of colour. But I will take the risk as £329. It seems a lot of money. Maybe I'll import one for a little bit less. I don't know. We'll see. Some ReRes that we may see. Thundershot. I'm hoping that we'll probably see a Thundershot ReRe again, being that the other car, the Terra Scorcher, came out. So it would be very easy for them to do a Thundershot ReRe again. So we might see one of those. We know definitely that the Avante is coming out again, so there's going to be a ReRelease Avante again, which is going to be the same as a 2011. And there's also a ReRelease of the Nova Fox again as well. Now I know those are definitely coming in the next few months, but I did hear that the ReRelease Avante is going to be expensive, but I have no price on it yet. Kyosho brought out the Phantom. I have one here. And these are still available for about £235. The main issue with them is when they first come out, there was hardly any of them around, and America struggled to get them for some strange reason. We've now seen in the UK a second wave of the cars coming, and you can pick them up pretty easy online. Like the TCO1 from Tamiya, spare parts impossible. Even to the point where you cannot even get wheels and tires for this car. So if I drive this car too much and I need to replace the wheels and tires, I'll have to go aftermarket. I can't actually go online and buy these tires yet. And being that they're foam, they don't last very long. One thing that's very strange is when Kyosho made the announcement that they were bringing the Phantom out, it was going to be paired with another brushless motor, Le Mans 480T. Now, we haven't seen that motor anywhere. And the Kyosho electronic speed controller as well that's going to drive it, they're in super short supply. I've actually got one in my Tomahawk, but I can't get another one, and no one's seen any of them. So the car's been out now a few months, but no spares, no parts, no upgrades, and no motor, which is very strange. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. I guess the manufacturers are putting all their effort and their resources into just getting the kits out, and then at some point they'll get round to doing the parts and things like that. Schumacher. Schumacher just released the Storm ST Stadium truck, but no signs of any vintage ReRelease. Hopefully we might see a Bosscat maybe, or we could see a Cat 2000, or I would personally love to see a short wheelbase Cat ReRelease. Because that would be very easy for them to do, because you could take the Schumacher Cat XLS, change the chassis around a little bit, change the body, and then you've got a short wheelbase one, which is what I would love to have myself. But it's all very quiet on the ReRelease front from Schumacher, but you can still pick up a Cat XLS. So now we're on to the interesting bit, my predictions of what's going to go up, what's going to go down, what's going to go flat, and what's worth buying. So, shooting stars. Now, the first shooting star is this, the Madcap. Now, in my last video, 7 months ago, it was also on my radar as one that was going to go up, and it has. These are now selling for £220 to £300. And obviously, if you went back and watched that video, you'll notice that this car has changed a lot since then. It needed to be fully restored, and it has been. So it now has a vintage body and vintage decals and high caps, and is fully restored with nice tires, and the car is all looking lovely. New arms. So that's my one. Now, being that they sell for £200 to £300 now, why am I still pushing it as a shooting star? Well, I think it still has a way to go. It's a very gorgeous looking buggy, and it fits in very nicely and has been pulled along by the Astute, the Super Astute. Now, for some reason, it has a big following. Also, it's difficult to restore these, especially getting front tires and things like that. So I still think it's got room to grow. Maybe not as much as it has done, because I predicted it would be to 2 to 250, and it's now selling at 220 to 300. So being that it's an entry-level buggy, I still think we're going to see more stronger sort of 300s and 350 for good ones, not ropey ones, really good ones. So that's my first prediction for a shooting star. Now, my second shooting star is quite an obvious one. It's the Porsche 959. Now, this is one of the first cars I restored on the show, and it still gets work done to it all the time. I've just fitted a professional painted driver set in it, and it's had new aluminium wheels added to the car. Now, why do I think this is still a shooting star, even though prices have already gone up quite a lot? Well, it's one of those cars that's got a massive following. It's very famous. It's very much Avante and the Porsche 959. So I can just see these going up and up and up in value. Now, we have seen more ropey ones turning up as people are like finding them in their lofts and things like that. But to find good finished ones that have painted up well and the bodies are not damaged. These are very rare, and people are hoarding them as well. There's a few collectors that have lots of these, so they're so hard to get hold of. Now you can get ReRe bodies, because this is a ReRe body but original decals, so you can bring back old ones, but parts are so expensive, so even that's limiting how many can be restored. So this one will just keep going up and up and up and up, and being that the Blazing Blazer is at 1500, this I'm surprised this is not already 600, 700, 800 pound cars, because it's such an icon. So that's my second shooting star. What's next? Now the next shooting star on the list is this beautiful icon of a car, the Super Shot. Now this is a vintage one, this is not a ReRe one. Tamiya brought out a ReRe one and they changed the name and it's Super Hot Shot, whereas the originals were Super Shots, which is the proper name, so don't ask me why they changed it, but there we go. Now why is this on the list? Well, this car only came out for a very short window of time, so there isn't that many of them around. But the price of the vintage cars has been pulled down by the ReRe, but this will change. Currently, you can pick these up for £300, but the new in-box Super Hotshot kits are about the same sort of money, £280 to £300. So a vintage one in good condition versus a new in-box being the same price is definitely not quite right. Also, the vintage ones have the Techni-Power motor in them, the RX 540s, so that has a value on its own, which makes this car at £300 with a motor like that in it really good value. So in the future, as those ReRe kits diminish, this car will rise up and it will go from 300 to 400 to 500. So that's my prediction for this Super Shot. The next car on the shooting star list needs no introduction. It's probably the flagship car for Tamiya, and that is the Avante. Now, why is the Avante on this list? Well, prices have gone to the moon. They have actually zoomed. Now, I went online and I was looking up some prices and I couldn't really believe it. An Avante 2011 new in box just sold for £643. And a 1988 is selling for 696 in about this kind of condition. So this is a big, strong increase. Now, one of the Avante cars that's not doing quite as well was the Avante 2001. They're now selling for about 400. That's still a big step forward because I paid way under £400 for these cars. So that's gone up, but not quite as much, which is kind of surprising because for me, the Avante 2001 is the more desirable car. It's not the same as these. It has different wheels that are unique, different body, different driver, different bumper. These are all things that make it unique to the Avante range. Also, the decals are my favorite as well. So make of that what you will. Now, whether that means the 2001 will come up a bit long to meet the others, I honestly don't know at the moment. Now, one thing that's kind of muddying the water of where these are going is that Tamiya is bringing out a re-release Avante. So it's basically going to be exactly the same as the 2011, but I guess we'll just call it the Avante 2020 or Avante 2021. Whenever it's due, whether it comes out before the end of the year or next year. So as for prices moving forward, I would take a guess that we will see the 88s continue to go up in price, but the 2011s may pull back a little bit if the ReRe is exactly the same as a 2011, because it means that it's the same car. The next shooting star isn't actually a car, it is this, the AdSpec Plus. Now, I went online and I looked these up purely by accident, and these are now selling for an insane amount of money. In this condition, new in box pretty much, they're selling for £250 each. And there's the non-plus version is selling for 190 to 200. So these have gone up loads in value. So that's my last shooting star. That's this. Whether it goes up again a bit more, I'd be surprised if it goes up any more than it has, because it's basically doubled in price. So there you go. I was just so surprised at the price of these. I just added it to the end of the list for you. So keep an eye out if you see any of these, because whew, £250. It's car price, that is. So now to the flatliners, and you might be surprised at this one, but the first one on the list is this, the Top Force Evo. Now, I'm pretty sure you're all going, you mad, Gavin? That's one of the most desirable cars out there. Yeah, But going by the prices have come down. Now, when I bought mine, they were 500 to 550 all day long, and there was none of them. Now, I've just seen two sell. One sold for 370 and the other sold for 500. So it's definitely coming down. But you say, well, why is that when everything else is going up? And I think the reason is this. This is my replica Top Force Evolution. So I think what's happened is people can't get hold of the original ones, so they've made their own. Now, we've all figured out that you can use RERE dye and dye your rims. These are actually dyed rims, these aren't original rims. So that gives you the rims. You can also get the chassis. Tamiya brought them out again, so you could get the chassis. Also, they brought out the high caps like I have here. So you can make almost an exact replica of a Top Force Evo through other bits and pieces. Now, the only thing you'll probably struggle with is to get the same diffs, but apart from that, you can have the same suspension, you can have the same wheels, the same body, you can get aftermarket decals, and you're almost running the same sort of thing. You can even go to the point where, like I did with this one, whereas I put titanium screws in. I've even got the original tires that match. But you don't have to go to that length. You can actually get the square spikes, which are a lot cheaper than the original round spikes. So for very little money, you can have a car that looks very much like an original. And I think that's what's happened is the market, everybody that wanted one made their own. So prices have kind of stalled a little bit. So that's one of my first flatliners. What do you think? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think I'm bonkers? This is the most desirable car ever. Well, don't get me wrong, I love this car. It's one of my favorite ones in the collection, but just going by the few that have sold, prices seem to have come down. Now, there isn't that many of them about, so I don't have hundreds of price points that have sold. I only have a few, so that can play a bit of a part to it. But there we go. So what do you think? Put your comments below. Now, the next car that's a flatliner again might be a bit of a surprise to you, and that is the Falcon. Now you say, well, why? It's a massively desirable car. And I think that's part of it, is that there's a lot of them around. A lot of people have been bringing them out and trying to sell them and restore them. Had a few issues with parts and it's difficult to get all the bits and pieces. And they don't drive as well as you kind of think. So I think there's that side of it. But prices now for Falcons, they're really selling for £200 will get you a good Falcon. Whereas I predicted that these would be way more than that. For £200 to get a really good one, you can get ropier ones a lot cheaper than that. So there's a lot of ropey ones around. So yeah, that's the Falcon. I'm surprised it's not more at the £300 mark than a £200 mark. Will it go up in the future? I don't know. I can't really predict. Maybe a little bit, but I would have expected it to rise now. So I think with its reputation of being very flimsy, very difficult to restore, people have just gone off them, or there's just a lot of them that have come out of the woodwork, because when I went online to check prices, there was a lot of them for sale, all at different ranges. But there was new in box kits doing record prices, so there is a big disparity between a new in box kit and a good quality one. Now this one is brand new and mint, but I'd be surprised if it wouldn't sell for like £250. So there we go, that's the Falcon. Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Comments below. Right, now we move on to a segment called Sunken Treasure. Yeah, cars that are bottomed out in price, that are super cheap, that I can see them zooming back up again. And the first one is the Terra Scorcher. Not the new one, the vintage one. Now I was looking at prices of the vintage ones and they've been selling for dirt cheap. I've seen good Terra Scorchers going for £75 to £102, which is insanely cheap. And I think the reason is because the ReRe came out, it was hardly any different than the vintage one. So prices have just plummeted and people are just, when they want one, they're buying a new in-box one. So now is a perfect opportunity if you can find one that comes up to pick up a original vintage Terra Scorcher, because you can then get the little bits and pieces to bring it up new body, to bring it up to mint condition, because I can only see them going back up in price. But for £75 to £102, and there was about 3 or 4 that sold for that all looked in pretty good condition, not ropey, so that's a super bargain. I had a look this morning and I couldn't find any, because once I noticed that, I looked to see whether I could get one myself. So it's kind of waiting to see when they pop up. because obviously there's a lot of the ReRelease out there at the moment, kind of flooding the market. So you've got to wait for a vintage one that's good to turn up, and if you just keep an eye on it and watch it, there's a lot of people that are trying to sell them at like buy it now prices of like £200, but the ones that are on bids are only making £75 to £102. So that's a potential bargain. Now this next car could have been in flatliners, but also in sunken treasure, and that is one of my favorites, which is the Neo Top Force. Now in my last video 7 months ago, I predicted that this would go up in price. If anything, it's kind of gone down in price a little bit. I've seen 3 of these for sale from £40 to £120, and there wasn't much in it. So once someone got an absolute bargain at £40. Now I still predict that this will go up, but why? Because it's still super rare. There's not many of them around at all, so I still predict that these will go up in price. But I think the main thing that's hurting them is people just don't know about them. So there you go, that's the Neo Top Force. Still a bit of a bargain if you can get one. And the last car on the list of the sunken treasure is this. Now this might be a bit of a surprise and it's a bit controversial, so comment below what you think, and that is the Mark II Avante. Now we all know that the Avante Mark II is not really seen as the same sort of love that the Avantes were. Now these are selling for £140 to £150, which I think is a bargain. Now I can see these going up in value as we go through time, so they're still, I think, a good buy if you can get one now. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Now I've put Avante livery on it to make it a little bit more like the Avantes. It comes with this horrible livery that I don't like, but they're not that easy to find either. So I can predict that hopefully this is going to then come up to be more valuable. But I could be wrong. It's one to watch. It's an interesting one because it's obviously an Avante Mark II, so it's branded as an Avante, even though it's not exactly a unique chassis and it's nothing like the other Avantes. My prediction of the coming market as a whole, moving forward through this whole COVID into the end of 2020 to the beginning of 2021. Now, I personally feel that there's going to be a bit of a pullback, and prices are going to stay the same or slightly retract as more people lose their jobs. In the UK, the pound is dropping in value all the time, so it means when we buy stuff from outside, things get more and more expensive. So new inbox kits are going to get more and more expensive, and we're seeing that already. So I don't see the whole market continuing this massive boom. There will be a bit of a retraction on some of the prices, but some of the gems that I mentioned before, I think will still rise to the top, whereas the overall whole price of some of the kits that aren't quite as desirable will probably retract just a little bit. So what do you think? Comment below. Thanks so much. Please like and subscribe, and if you'd like to support the channel, head over to our Patreon. I have a link below. See you guys soon. Bye bye. Check out one of these videos for some more RC fun.